They don't need bullets to end you anymore. They just leave you half buried, alone in a desert too quiet to shout back. Late July, the Mojave burned like a stove left on all day, the kind of heat that bends metal and makes men forget how to be kind. That's where Jack Boone found her. Not all of her, only the top half. Her face was wrecked, dust packed into every line. One eye swollen shut, the other sealed like it had seen more than it could hold. Lips split, crusted with sun and blood. Her dress hung in ragged strips, ripped at the ribs and torn along one thigh. If the buzzards hadn't claimed her, it meant someone shoved her into the earth just deep enough to hide, not deep enough to die. Whoever did it had done it right before Jack showed up. That was the only good luck she had. Jack wasn't out to save anybody. Truth is, he hadn't saved himself in years. He was only trailing Dusty, his dog, smart as most men and loyal like whiskey. The mutt froze by a boulder shaped like a gravestone, ears flat, tail stiff. No bark, no sniff. Just a stare. Jack followed that stare and saw hair, then skin, then fear. Something in him locked up. Not panic, not pity, something older, like regret waking after a long sleep. She was still breathing, barely, each breath thin and papery. He didn't shout, didn't rush. He knelt, tipped water slowly at her mouth. She flinched, coughed, and didn't wake. So he did the rare thing a man like him does. He lifted her. No questions, no reasons, just a duty cut from somewhere between guilt and instinct. He carried her to an old hunting shack, a place left behind years earlier, back before Jack stopped believing anything good could survive in this country. He wrapped her in his coat, sparked a fire, and sat while Dusty curled close, the three of them listening like the world might knock. People don't leave someone like that for coyotes by accident. Not bandits, not beasts. That kind of harm is personal. Slow, mean. Out here, folks don't always kill quickly. Sometimes they let the desert do it. Funny thing, Jack had been riding 30 years with nowhere to land. But it felt like he'd finally ended up right where he was supposed to be. That's when everything began to turn. She didn't wake the first night. Didn't move, just breathed, like the world owed her one more try. Jack cleaned what he could, washed the blood from her hair, picked cactus thorns from her feet like pulling out old sins. She didn't cry or twitch. Dusty held guard by the cot, tail down, ears ticking at every crackle. By morning the shack smelled of heat and whiskey. Her skin looked less like death, though her ribs still poked out like fence posts. Jack boiled water, tore up his shirt for bandages. He wasn't much at nursing, but he'd seen enough broken bodies in the war to know pain's face. On the second day, her eyes opened, green. Not soft green, sharp like moss on rock. Eyes that didn't just look at you, they measured you. She didn't talk. He passed water. She drank and kept quiet. Time passed before she tried to sit. Longer still before any words came. When they did, it wasn't a name. Why'd you stop? He didn't answer right off. He glanced at Dusty. Dusty stared back. The dog found you, Jack said at last. She blinked. Why didn't you leave me? He shrugged. Didn't sit right. She nodded slowly, like that told her all she needed about him. Later, she showed her wrist. A mark there, a round scar burned in, like someone pressed hot iron into her skin on purpose. Jack didn't say a word out loud. Inside, something went cold. He'd seen that seal years ago, stamped on a letter that could have changed his life. He never answered it. Now it was scorched into the arm of a girl left to die. That's when he knew this wasn't only a rescue. This was the past catching up. Jack didn't sleep. He sat by the flames with that old letter playing in his head like a tune half remembered. He never wrote back then. Looks like fate did it for him. Whatever second chance. It was about to be tried hard. And mercy wasn't on the way. She told him her name, Ruth, right around the time she could stand. And that's when the first bullet snapped through the window. Not loud, just a dry crack that sucked the sound out of the air. Jack dropped the tin cup, grabbed his rifle. But the next shot came sooner, punching a beam above his head. He knew right then. Whoever they were, they'd come to finish what they started. Down, he growled, dragging Ruth behind the table. Dusty let out one bark and then a sharp yelp. Hit not bad, but enough to make him snarl from a corner. Jack peered through a split in the boards. Black coat, low hat, crouched by the old water tower. Not a common thief, too clean, too still. "Stay here," Jack said. Ruth didn't. She slid to Dusty, tore fabric from her shirt, wrapped his side like she'd done it before. Jack glanced at her, saw something fierce there now. Another shot chewed the door frame into splinters. Ruth reached for the Colt, no shaking, no doubt. She moved to the side window, drew one breath, popped up, and fired. A scream told her she'd hit meat. Jack kicked the door, wide, rifle set. Ruth followed him out. The shooter crawled, shoulders slick with blood. He was a kid, too young for this, but his eyes were hollow. Not scared. Not mad. Empty. Jack lifted the barrel. Ruth stopped him. "I've got this," she said, kneeling by the boy. "Who sent you?" He spat blood and grinned. "They know you're breathing," he coughed, "and they know he helped." Jack stiffened. Ruth's jaw tightened. "Why?" she asked. The boy rasped, "Don't ask why. Just clean up the mess." She stood, said nothing, leveled the Colt, and ended it. The quiet after that weighed more than the shot. Jack didn't speak. Ruth wiped the barrel with her sleeve, sat on the porch, eyes forward. No tears, no tremble, just slow, even breaths, like this was the minute she stopped only surviving and started deciding who she'd be. That night she didn't sleep. She oiled the gun again, fed Dusty by hand, then sat with the fire and didn't flinch. When Jack finally asked if she was ready to talk, she said, "Not yet. But soon." They didn't fill the air with words after the shooting stopped. Not when Jack rolled the body into a ditch behind the shack. Not when smoke thinned and nothing moved except the dog's ribs. Ruth hugged the Colt, knuckles white. That bullet wasn't a warning. It was meant to stop a life. Jack knew a clean kill order when he heard it. Cold work from someone who had already planned the ending. He poured her a drink. She left it in his hand and stared at the fire like it was telling secrets only she could hear. "Was it them?" she asked at last. He didn't reply. Didn't have to. One shot might be a chance. Two is a message. Later, he found her outside, barefoot in the dust, eyes on the stars like they owed her light. She pointed at the thin moon, cracked like a splinter. "That's how it felt in the pit," she said. "I could see the light, but it couldn't see me." Jack had no smart words, so he didn't try. He sat beside her and passed the flask. That's when she spoke a name, the one who paid the sundown riders to take her, the one who had her blood marked for erasing. Jack stopped being careful. He went inside, grabbed the map they took off Dust Whip, and drew a big red X. Ruth didn't ask the destination. She nodded once, stepped in, and packed the guns. Jack didn't wait for morning. He saddled up under the thin moon, air heavy with more than heat. Ruth was already set, boots laced, Colt loaded. No speeches. Just a look. They both knew this wasn't another trail ride. This was the end of a hunt. They found Cole, the last sundown rider, holed up in a half-sunk trading post, a weather-beaten box, swallowed by sand and years. He wasn't hiding. He was waiting, gun drawn, smiling cold like he'd been expecting them since the day they left her in that dirt. Jack stepped in first, old boots. Creaking, finger steady. But Ruth moved quicker, faster than fear, faster than memory. She didn't aim to kill, just to stop him. One clean shot through the shoulder. He dropped like a stone, cursing more from surprise than pain. Ruth walked up slowly, looked him in the eyes, and said, "This is for everything you figured I'd forget." She could have ended it. She didn't. She turned her back and left him bleeding in his own quiet. Because not all justice needs a grave, only the weight of being seen. They rode out without noise. No cheers, no song, just wind, dust, and the hard truth that something broken had finally settled. Ruth didn't speak of revenge again. She simply lived. Each dawn, she stood a little taller. Each mile she softened a little more, not forgetting, but not running, either. Healing never looks like the stories. It's not a sunrise with a chorus. Sometimes it's just two people sitting on a step, one who didn't walk away, and a choice to stop being broken. Back at the shack, Dusty limped but healed, tail thumping the floor whenever Ruth passed. Jack patched the window, planed new boards, and burned the blood-soaked rags in a pit behind the shed. At dusk, Ruth would stand in the doorway with a Colt open in her hands, checking the cylinder not because she needed to fire again, but because it felt like holding the line she'd drawn. Jack dragged water from the well and let the rope burn his palms on purpose, pain to remind him he was awake. Nights came easier. Ruth slept with her back to the wall at first, then on her side, then finally on her stomach like a kid who trusts the room. On the 7th night, she handed Jack the flask instead of taking it. "For Dusty," she said. "For you," he answered. They didn't wait for trouble to return. Ruth traced the scar on her wrist and told the story plainly. The brand, the pit, the riders, the order to make her vanish, to bury the family name that lined her blood. Jack listened, jaw tight, thinking of that old letter with the same seal, how he hadn't answered, how fate had brought the mark back burned into a survivor's skin. He felt something old lift and something steady take its place. They rode out one last time to where the boulder stood like a headstone. Ruth laid a stone there, small, sharp, the color of old bone. "Not for them," she said. "For the girl who never saw the moon." Jack tipped his hat. Dusty nosed the dirt and whined low, then settled. They turned back toward the shack without looking over their shoulders. In the days that followed, Jack found he could look the horizon in the eye again. He fixed the door that never latched right. He put fresh water by the cot each morning without needing a reason. Ruth learned the names of the small birds that hopped along the fence, the way the wind shifted before heat rose, the exact sound Dusty made when he dreamed. She didn't turn gentle, she turned sure. The brand on her wrist didn't fade, but it stopped shouting. The map stayed on the table, the red X drying to a dull brown. Cole wouldn't ride again, and the man who signed the orders would feel his own circle closing. That was for later. Today was for breath. One evening, Ruth asked, "Who were you before this?" Jack stared into the fire, then at the dog, then at the mark on her skin. "Someone who let letters go unanswered," he said. She nodded. "Who are you now?" He poured water instead of whiskey. "The man who stops." She smiled, a real one this time, quick and bright, gone as fast as it came, but it stayed in the room like the last note of a song. When the wind howled, they listened. When it softened, they did too. Ruth oiled the Colt, then set it aside without touching it again for a whole day. Then two. Jack taught her to wrap a saddle so it didn't rub raw. She showed him how to bind a wound with less cloth. They traded skills the way people trade trust, quietly over time. And the desert, mean as it is, gave them a few small mercies. A cloud shade at noon, a night breeze cool. Enough to sleep, Dusty's bark at a rabbit that somehow escaped anyway. Healing didn't erase the past, it planted it, like a signpost. They both learned to walk by it, without living under it. If you've carried a quiet like theirs, one shaped like a coin, a name, a memory shoved just deep enough, you know the weight. Maybe it's time to dig it up. Not to bleed again, but to finally breathe. Because sometimes the change isn't a gunfight or a headline. Sometimes it's a hand that doesn't let go and a choice not to stay small. Ruth's story isn't a clean hymn. It's scar and grit and breath, kept not stolen. And if any part of this brushed a sore place in you that you thought had gone numb, don't drift off. Stick around. Subscribe, stay close. Ruth's chapter here might have closed, but yours is just beginning.